Uh,
It's hard to get good help sometimes, Hiro.
what's up? What's up?
It pays if you do your homework, buddy. It does. How you going, buddy?
I'm good. Hey, man.
I'm all right, man. I'm really well. I'm going well,
Good, good.
and excited to sort of extend on from what we were talking about last week
Yeah.
with regards to emotional intelligence. But I'm going to chuck you on the spot, Hiro. We haven't rehearsed this, but let's see. What do you remember about emotional intelligence? What
You know
what we
what?
covered?
I was thinking about it. I was trying to, you know, remember what I learned last week while I was driving back to my apartment. It's, I know it's about emotion,
Yeah, that's an
right?
important bit.
Yeah. How you think and how your students or whoever coach you're coaching, you have to think about emotions of each other.
I love the body language, man. It's
Yeah,
really
man.
helping. It's really helping. Should I take?
Understanding each other.
Should I put you out of your misery, Hiro, and give you the lowdown, man? It's funny, viewers, because just before we went live, Hiro was complaining about how students don't listen. So that's really interesting.
Hey, when did I say that? You. Oh yeah, I did. I did, didn't I?
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
It's not like
No, you're
I
absolutely
wasn't
right.
talking about Kendo students.
No. You were talking about
Your students.
university students. That's right.
Yeah.
Full disclaimer: we weren't potty mouthing our athletes at all.
Oh
Um, so that's right. So emotional intelligence is about understanding our emotions and the impact that those emotions have on the people that we're working with, right? So if we're in the dojo, the impact that our emotional responses or the way that we hold ourselves, our facial expressions, our body language, the things that we say, the way that we act, the
man.
impact that those things have on our learners, right? So that's emotional intelligence. So we were talking last week about the style of coaching that we have. So, for example, if you're a business coach and you're very sort of detailed about every sort of little thing that happens, and you've got to planned out right to the final degree, or if you're a laid back coach, or the nice guy or nice girl coach, all those sorts of things, the way that we project ourselves and the way that we conduct ourselves. Understanding that as the entry point to understand how those things are perceived or picked up by our athletes, right? Because at the end of the day, the better we get at perceiving those emotions, or reading, or understanding and managing those emotions, the idea is that the better we are at better able we are to influence our learners, right, and their experience. Does that make sense, mate?
Yeah.
100%.
100%, professor. I'm listening.
Love
I'm
it. Right.
learning. I'm a good student.
You're a great student, Hiro, and I love it. I love having you here. It's fantastic.
Cheers very much.
So what I thought we'd do is just we'll go through another couple of slides, but these things are sort of an extension of what we covered last week. So it's a really important sort of carrying on. We looked at the styles, and now we're going to go through what all this means, how we can better reflect on what we're doing. But before we start, I thought what I'd do is just sort of outline this idea that the coach, or the sensei, or the senpai, or whatever your title is an educator. You're an educator. And there's so much research done on this, and the importance of this to really get a good learning experience in the people that we work with to make this shift is absolutely key. So let me unpack this just a little bit before we crack on. So the idea is that oftentimes when we talk about the coach, or we think about our role as a coach, we think about teaching the technical aspects of the sport, in our case, Kendo, right? So how do we strike Menuchi? How do we move our footwork faster in our Nirangwaza? What timing we should be executing Suriage? Those sort of technical things are often what we think about, and that's absolutely fine. But if we were to look at our role in a more holistic way, so we understand that we also impact learning in the social domain, in the emotional domain, and the cognitive domain, then we start to really appreciate what our role is in the dojo. So let me give you a couple of examples, right? When we have a group of people in our dojo, at any age, but let's just pick on, let's say, late teenage years, right? The social aspect for them, generally speaking, is really important. They might be driven by competition or grading, and that's their personal goal. But the social aspect for late teens and adults in particular is really, really important. So when we're talking about developing opportunities for people to learn how to interact with each other, learn what's okay to say to a senpai, and maybe, you know, how to deal with beginners or something like that. That's a really important social learning or social interaction that we as coaches can facilitate, right? If we think solely about how to strike faster, stronger, better, that's part of what we do. But if we can acknowledge that these are people that we're working with, then that remit becomes a lot bigger, right? Into the emotional and the cognitive, which is what's going on between your ears and those sorts of things. So it's really important that we see philosophically, we see our role as a senpai, as a sensei, as a coach, as an instructor, as one not just of a technician, but also as, or more purposefully, as an educator. I think that's really, really important. And there's lots of research to back that up as well. So that's the philosophical sort of idea of all of these things, man. But let me let's draw back directly to what we were talking about last week. So EQ, right? EQ was the shorthand for emotional intelligence or emotional quotient. What this requires is reflection. So we have to reflect back on how we are being perceived, how effective or efficient we're being when we're running a training. So a throwback to last week, how does my coaching style impact learning, right? So again, we talked about if you were a fanatical coach, right? Single-minded, this is my way or the highway, very autocratic, whatever that is. We talked about the benefits and the drawbacks or the potential blind spots of that. The most important thing is to reflect, okay, this is my style. This is the style that I do, that I show most of the time. How does that impact the learning of my members? And this is where having emotional intelligence requires us to reflect, right? We really have to think about how it's being perceived. So part of that is, how do my athletes learn best? What sort of things, how do I pitch it in a way that they enjoy it? How do I phrase this particular concept in a way that more people can pick it up or apply it, you know? And we've talked about that heaps of times, Hiro, with regards to scenario trainings or changing the time on the clock or the scoreboard, and, you know, like giving people games to work through. So things like that. So just thinking and reflecting on how your athletes learn best is a really important way forward towards that emotional intelligence. And that little piece of text that's cut off there, it's a bit of a shame, because the statement is, what worked for you might be completely different for what works for your athletes. Right. And so basically, you know, the way that you trained me, Hiro, when we were younger, might not be the best way with young people today. Right. You know what I mean? And you see that, like, when we talk about the influence that Japanese bukatsu or Japanese school trainings and stuff have on trainings outside of Japan in terms of the menu, you know, the structure, kirikaishi, kihon, blah, blah, blah. That might not be the best way just because it worked for us. You know what I mean? And you would see that in your context at the moment, right? You can't do the same style of kakarigeko as you used to do.
No.
I mean, it may have worked for you, but not necessarily for people of that age now, right?
Right.
Yeah. So really important to sort of think about those things. So let's move on. Now, I touched on this before, but this is a really important concept. We don't coach Kendo. We coach people, right? So it's a cool. It makes you sound really smart when you say it. So I bring it out all the time. It's one of the only few that I have.
It is a catchphrase, killer
phrase, huh? Yeah, it's killer. I love it. But basically, we have to think about the athlete as a person and what makes him or her tick overall. They're not just a kendo practitioner. They're not just a member. They're also a brother, a sister, an uncle, an auntie, a mother, a father, whatever. They've got work, they've got school, they've got church, they've got all sorts of other commitments that impact who they are, generally speaking, but also day to day when they turn up to training. And what we, the laugh and the banter that we had last week, it might not be landing today because there's other stuff going on in that person's world. We're people, we know that, but so are the people that we coach. So what we have to do, and this is again a justification for being a reflective coach, is to figure out, to acknowledge that we're coaching people, and then to figure out how we can reach them, the whole person, rather than just making them a better, faster Debana Kote machine. We have to think about the overall experience on those trainings, even just to keep them coming back, let alone to keep them learning and enjoying our trainings, right? So these are the three things, and this is the crux of our episode today. These are the three things that we're going to look at. We're going to talk about efficiency, reflecting on your efficiency, reflecting on your effectiveness, and reflecting on your ethics, right? So just to be clear, where do we reflect? What areas should we be reflecting on? It's all good to say, oh, yeah, today's training went pretty good. Everyone's sweating. But there's a few other little details that if we really wanted to start to improve our emotional intelligence, if we land in these areas here, then we get a bit more detail in our reflection, right? So let's talk about efficiency. Efficiency, Hiro, is essentially the smoothness of your keiko, of your training, right? So, for example, can people hear me when I'm talking, right? There's a lot of other noise going on. You might be sharing the dojo with a basketball club or something.
Oh, so bad.
But there might be people continue, the beginners keep training over there. Can my athletes actually hear me when they've got their men on? Can they actually hear me when I've got my own men on and I'm trying to yell something to them through there? That's a real easy thing to reflect on. Can they hear me? Can they see me? Do they understand? Or could things run a little bit more smoothly in what I'm doing? So I put stuff up here like more resources, or can I use different resources? And really thinking through, was that maximizing the amount of time that people were actually doing kendo? And I think, we've chatted about this again a few times, man. Like, one thing that we do in kendo a lot, but we don't think about it, is the kotai thing, right?
Right.
So you and Masa are finishing off your 5 minuchi or whatever it is, and me and Kai have already finished. And we stand there and we wait for you until and when you finish that, you do sonkyo and 5 steps, and you say arigatou gozaimashita, really important regi, that's cool. And then kotai, we all move around together. Well, is there about 45 or 60 seconds there where I've been standing around not doing anything? Not to mention, then we do onegai shimasu, 3 steps in, sonkyo, stand up, move back to the start, and then start again. And some of the better trainings that I've been involved in are where everybody does a rei at the start, everyone does sonkyo at the start, and then in between, it's a brief acknowledgement, and we go ritsure, standing bow, no sonkyo, and straight into it. Because the efficiency of that training is much more smooth, and there's much more kendo going on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's a way to sort of think about the efficiency and reflecting on how smooth training was, right? So that's the first one. Second one is your effectiveness, right? So it's a really subtle but important difference there. And the best way that I can describe this is, are my athletes picking up what I'm putting down, right? So basically what I mean by that is my message getting across, right? And if I'm saying, in this particular drill or in this strategy, we're looking to keep the other person with their back to the line, right? And so that's the concept that I want to be coaching today. But is every member actually getting this? Am I looking around? Am I reading their faces? And I can see Hiro hasn't really understood what we're working on here, and it's not really coming through. What do I need to do now to help Hiro through and get him to understand this a bit better? And I think that it's really important for us, particularly in Kendo and particularly outside of Japan, to think about people who have English as a second language. If we're coaching in English, that is, right? So we go through these concepts as we understand them as coaches, but do our exchange students understand what's going on? And if not, then these issues, these topics, these scenarios, these learnings, these concepts, they're missed by the people that we're working with. And that's a real shame, right? Because the learning is limited, their performance is limited, and so on. So it's about whether or not, with efficiency, we were talking about the smoothness and how much time we have on task. The effectiveness is talking about, are my athletes actually understanding what I'm trying to teach them or coach them, right? So this is a really important thing. And as it's cut off, unfortunately, it's cut off on the slide there, but how is my body language impacting this relationship, right? Do I talk more to a certain group of athletes than others? Am I talking more clearly, or is that being picked up by certain athletes more than others, right? So really sort of unpacking and reflecting on the effectiveness is a really important part. You ready for the third one, buddy?
All right, mate.
Let's go. Let's do it. There'll be a test on this at the end of the week. So
Too old.
Unfortunately, the slide's been cut off again, which I'm annoyed about. I'll fix that up in post. But this one here is about the ethical or moral or political concerns that might come up. Now, some people might be thinking, "Oh, that's too big, right? Way too big." But hear me out for a little bit here, because this is really important, and it sort of underpins a lot of the stuff that I talk about in our other episodes as well. Basically, what we're talking about here is who's advantaged and who's disadvantaged in my coaching sessions. Now, let me give you a couple of examples. There's research done in sport coaching that says or suggests that coaches give different types of feedback to boys than to girls, right? The way that we talk to male athletes is very, very different to the way that we talk to female athletes on average, right? And that's around things like giving much more technical advice or feedback to boys and giving reassuring feedback to girls. So good girl, well done, versus your left foot's dragging behind you, mate. Hurry up, bring that left foot up, or something like that. Now, again, this isn't everybody, of course, but if we were to stop and think, is the feedback that I'm giving or the way that I'm presenting information different for the boys and the girls in the club, as I said before, for the English speakers of other languages and the native speakers? Is that different? Does that matter? Those sorts of things are where we can start to unpack a deeper level of reflection and see, really, are people being disadvantaged by the way that I'm conducting my sessions, right? And we don't think about this enough, I don't think. You know what I mean? Here's another example. There's a second point on the slide. When it comes to selections, for example, what do you do as a coach / selector in your club or region or federation if we know that this particular athlete has an injury, not quite up to full capacity, but a really good player in the team? Do we select them? Do we put them on the team, or do we rest them? These sorts of decisions come up naturally in the competitive environment, right? But unless we really think about it and what message that sends out, then we're missing an opportunity for reflection. And I'll give you a really good lived example of this. I once had a young guy in the club, Japanese guy, Masa. Hi, Masa.
Mm.
I'm sure he's watching. And young Masa was, at that time, he was about 15, I think, maybe 14. And he was constantly sleeping in. Constantly sleeping because he was a teenager, and that's what teenagers do, and that's fine. But what that meant was that he was late to trainings. He was, he wasn't as reliable as we wanted. And the message to Masa was from myself and the other coaches for the 2 weeks leading up to the competition, and of course, naturally at the competition day, you need to be here early. And he did. If my memory serves me right, he did well right up to the day of the competition, and he was late. Hiro, he was late to the competition, and so the decision that we made was that, hey, this is not fair. This is not equitable to the others that have been turning up and training. You're our gun. You're our. We need you on board. But we made a commitment to the others in the team, and you were absolutely 100% clear on what the expectations were. You didn't turn up, you don't get to compete. And if that's what we want to do as coaches, to teach a lesson about whatever it might be, punctuality or character or commitment or whatever, those are the decisions that we need to make. And when we reflect in this space here, that gives us the opportunity to do that. And that's why this is a really important thing. And the third point there, again, it's cut off, which is a real shame, but what traditional or unquestioned aspects of our sport are problematic and need to be unpacked. And I think in Kendo, there are so many traditions and unquestioned things that we reflect on and say, you know what, I don't know if that needs to be in this dojo. You know what, I think that's a really valuable thing to keep, but we might be able to get rid of that thing because it serves to promote, some sort of masculinity that we don't really like here, and we want to sort of be a little bit more democratic or equitable or whatever the values are of the club. So these are the opportunities to do that, right? So there's essentially those three areas for us to reflect are really, really important. This is the last slide that I want to show you. This one is about what stops us from doing it, right? And I think it's fair to say, and this is all sort of backed up with research as well, but for all intents and purposes, they're pretty self-explanatory. The emotions and the subjectivity that we have as coaches. So when you were my coach, or when Alec was my coach, and you guys were doing your thing, that worked well for me, like we said before. And so naturally, if I don't reflect, then I just go ahead and reproduce exactly the same experiences that I've had. And I know that Alec and you, in my case, were excellent mentors, excellent coaches. And that's why it becomes really difficult for me to reflect and say, you know what, maybe that's not the right thing to do with this group of people in front of me today. You know what I mean? So when we think back to what it was like with old Tanaka sensei or Smith sensei or whoever it was, the way that they did it absolutely worked for us. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right way. And if we don't reflect on that and don't let go of that, then it really stops us from making progress as in our emotional intelligence. So the next one is being the focus on the coach as the technician. And we talked about this a little bit before. When we switch out of this and we look at ourselves as educators, and therefore we've got lots of different roles to fulfill or learning areas to address or be aware of, we can move away from this and sort of start thinking about a much more holistic approach. Whereas if we stick on the coach as a technician, then we're really limited in reflecting, because who cares? The point is that I'm trying to get you to strike men quicker. I want you to be able to execute suriagewaza whenever it is needed. The rest of that stuff that Blake was talking about, bugger it, it's stupid. It's not us. That's what stops us from reflecting. And when you think about your athletes as people, not as machines just to get better and faster and stronger at Kendo, that really matters, right? So if we reframe this idea of the technician into someone who facilitates learning, then we can start to reflect, improve our emotional intelligence, and then improve the experience of our athletes. And then the last one, of course, ties it all together. Ego, man. I've trained in Japan, buddy. I've got a 6-dan. I'm a wrenchy, baby. That
I'm the
no one
expert, man.
exactly, man. No one care, and no one should care. The thing is that we're all, if we can reframe this way of thinking, that we're all here to learn, and we can learn from each other, etc., etc. Then that ego can be put aside, and it really needs to be put aside a lot of the time. I'm sure there's people out there that are going, oh yeah, such and such and his ego, you know what I mean? And if we can put our own ego aside and say, okay, I'm here to learn, I'm here to reflect, and I'm here to be told that I'm not doing a good a job as I thought, then we can start to move forward. And I think those things are really important. So that's it, man. What do you think?
It's really, yeah. I mean, as a teacher, I think it's very interesting that because from coaching perspectives to see Kendo, and now I think still we do. I mean, a lot of people see for like example of the last uh, item that you showed us, the we're not expert, uh, but people are looking for expert. You know what I mean? Because I want to learn from you because you're an expert. I want to learn from an expert, not like you know, you know what I mean? I
Yeah.
think that's
So,
that's probably Americans thing. I don't know, but
well, look, but it's a good question, mate. And the thing is that it's not saying that we don't have expertise, right? So I have a certain amount of expertise because of the research and study that I've done. You have a certain amount of expertise because of your uh, own training and research and so on. But what we're talking about here is letting go of this barrier that can get in the way of growth and development and reflection being the topic of the day, right? So if we say I'm an expert, don't bother telling me anything because I know it already.
you
Then
shut
there's
up and listen to me.
shut up and listen, right? That's the problem. And then I think that most of us would probably say, hey, no, I'm not like that. I'm not like that. But what image or impression are we giving out there to our athletes? What is the perception? And if we are giving that off, then we need to know, right? We need to know about that so that we can fix it. So being open to having that come back at you and say, look, my perception of who you are is actually quite different to who you think you are. If we have that ego in the way, then that's going to fall on deaf ears. It's not going to go anywhere. Whereas if we can take that away and say, look, I acknowledge the difference between ego and confidence, because confidence is earned and ego is created, then it's fine to have confidence as a coach. That's no problem, not an issue at all. What the problem is putting the barrier up and saying, I'm the coach, I'm the sensei, I've been here, there, and everywhere, I've got this grade. Don't tell me, if you don't like it, you can piss off, like we talked about the other day. That's where the problem is, and those are the barriers to stopping us from growing. And
I think I think that's pretty much that what's going on. Not always, but commonly in Kendo world. I'm fifth dan, I'm sixth dan, I'm seventh dan. You do what I tell you to do,
Yeah.
and oh no, just you can ask me questions. They say you can ask me questions, but if they ask questions that they don't want to answer or they don't know any answers, they tend to get pissed off. So
Hey, look,
that's
I mean,
probably
honestly, I can absolutely 100% say with no doubt that I've been that way for a long time in my own coaching.
me too.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. And so it's not isolated to to any particular country or culture. It's just what happens, and I think that's why it's important for me, first of all, to switch the idea of being a coach, not as a technician, not as just someone that's going to make you stronger and faster and fitter or better at the sport. It's about, hey, this is a learning environment and I'm here to facilitate learning. And because I'm a facilitator of learning, I have to be open to changing the way that I do things in order to make that learning occur. That's the key. Yeah.
After all, it's not about us teaching, about them learning. So if they don't learn anything, we're failing as a facilitator or educator or coach. So
Absolutely, and that's exactly right, man. That's
yeah.
exactly right. Hiro, that is the guts of today and the content. We're going to carry on just a little bit next week with this topic, but I'm going to talk about where to get feedback from. We've talked about in a previous episode, we talked about how to give feedback. Now we're going to talk next week. We're going to talk about how to receive feedback, right, and where to get it from.
Cool.
Yeah. So look forward to that. Thank you very much, Hiro, for listening to me.
Thank you, Dr. Bennett.
That's what I'm here for, mate.
Nice piece.
We'll see you next time, buddy.
All right, cheers, bro.
Thanks, everyone. Don't forget to subscribe, comment. Love you. Thank you for being here. Bye.